President-elect Tinubu appoints Onanuga, Marwa, 11 others into Presidential Inauguration Committee. Femi Falana calls for investigation into alleged 2 billion naira bribe in Adamawa State supplementary elections. Nigeria's government to evacuate Nigerians trapped in Sudan. And outside of Nigeria, Kenya's President William Ruto concerned that Sudan crisis may deepen, threaten region. And judge orders detention of opposition leader Ganako. Those are some of the headlines, but let's get into what the crux of the conversation will be tonight on Politics HQ. It's been 17 years since Nigeria's last census. Statutorily, the world's most populous black nation is 7 years behind in the conduct of its population and housing census. Tonight, I have guests who will get into the issues surrounding the questions and the controversy surrounding the May 2023 census. And we'll also be looking at the House of Representatives committee that's investigating issues surrounding the Minister of Justice and the Attorney General of the Federation, as well as the Minister of Finance. That committee says they have questions to answer, which they refused to answer. We'll get into what that means for this investigation and what happens as the 9th National Assembly starts to wind down. You're watching Politics HQ. I'm Tolulope Adelere Balogun. Welcome to the show. Now, ideally, a census should be conducted every 10 years. But since the last exercise held in 2006 in Nigeria, multiple factors have prevented the country from conducting the exercise as at when due. A fresh exercise was due in 2016 when it was 1 year after President Muhammadu Buhari had assumed office. But the new government could not conduct the census due to the economic recession in 2017. Another attempt to conduct the exercise in 2020 was thwarted by the COVID-19 pandemic that grounded activities across the country and beyond. Now, 17 years down the line, the federal government is set to conduct a new census. Initially scheduled to hold between March 29th and April 2nd, the exercise is now billed to hold between May 3rd and the 7th. But as it happens with censuses in Nigeria, going back in time, controversy has been stirred up ahead of the count. Joining me in the studio is Adewale Ogunira, public analyst and the publisher of IntegrityReporters.com. I also have Victor Okpatola, legal practitioner, joining me via Zoom from Abuja, Nigeria. Gentlemen, welcome to Politics HQ. Thank you so much for joining me.
Okay.
So I want to start with you in terms of a very simple question, Adewale, and that's because we simply just don't know how many Nigerians there are. And when you look at the World Odometer's elaboration of the latest United Nations data, the current population is put at over 220 million. But if you ask somebody else, you'll get 180. If you ask another person, you get about 200 million. So a very simple question. Why is this a situation for Nigeria, a problem when we don't know how many Nigerians there are?
Yeah, thank you, Tolu. If you look at it from inception of Nigeria since 1866, we have census 1866, 1871, 1881, 1891, 1901. Although it's within the Lagos colony and its environs. But when you look at it, that's been controversy.
Yes.
All over. Why? It has been politicized, right? Okay, look at what was held in 1952. 1952, 1953. You see, in 1952, northern census was held, around August or whatever, right? 53 was held in Eastern Nigeria and Western Nigeria. If you look at the people, I'm sorry to say this, this is a national television almost. What we are talking about, we Nigerians, we need to be truthful and be realistic with ourselves, right? Let's come down to what was in 1962 and 63. For instance, I don't want to sound ethnical, right? The Northern was given 16.5 million people, right? Which the controversy, they said no, they're more than that. Another was did in 1963, I think they gave them 22.5 or some million, right? Okay, let's quickly go down to 2006, right? Let's look at what happened in 1973, right? You can't tell us this is the figure. It was highly controversial.
Interesting enough. Interesting enough, when you talk about the 1966 one, many people say that 1963. Many people say that at the end of the day, it was a figure arrived at by deliberation and negotiation rather than enumeration.
Of course, why that? They politicize it because census itself, it gives government of the day what to provide for the citizen, right? When I know the number of people in the north, in the south, in the east, we'll be able to know, okay, how can we take care of them? But in doing this, in this part of the world, in Nigeria, we are so untruthful about issues. I don't know what you say.
You don't know how to say.
I don't know. Right? Okay, look at what the one that was did in 2006. Even the present president-elect was the governor of Lagos State. He controverted.
Yes.
Lagos was giving 9.0 million. Why Kano was giving 9.5 million?
Okay.
Why the president-elect, Ashwani Bola Ahmed, he said no. Lagos did an independent census in conjunction with NPC, National Population Census, right? When Lagos did it, they had 17.5 million, right? Mind you, in 2006, we had sorry to say this, I don't want to sound a maker. I see the name myself. We had a northerner as the chairman. Before they brought in Easterner, Chief Festus Ojubegu, then former Nigeria MD, he said something that there was never a census conducted in Nigeria that has been truthful, that has been controversial. I think that one cost him his job in 2013.
Let me pick up from that with Victor Patola that's joining me via Zoom. So, as Adewale has said, Nigeria has had census since 1866. But there's census, whether they were at the pre-colonial times, colonial times as it may be, they've always had controversy. So let's bring it to the 2006 census. Many say that was probably the most fair census that Nigeria has had. The National Population Commission is now preparing for another census in 2023. Victor, do you think we've left behind the issues associated with conducting these census exercises in Nigeria? Have we learned from our mistakes of the past?
We have not learned from our mistakes of the past. First of all, the interest involved, the politics involved in census in Nigeria outweighs the positivity that ought to emerge from it. All over the world, especially in Nigeria, we ought to see census as a form of affirmative action, especially for minority ethnic groups. Now, the problem around census is always due to the fact that it's a means through which resources are allocated all over the country. So that is why there is always controversy around it. Now, why do I say that we have not learned from our previous errors? First of all, let's use this particular census as an example. And meanwhile, let me state currently, I am currently in court. I sued National Population Commission to court as a lawyer, to postpone this census. So in my presentation, I also mentioned the reason why we are going to court. Now, one of the reasons why we have not learned from our lesson is first, preparation. Our preparation has always been woeful. Now, when we look at the preparation of this census that we have done for this census, the National Population Commission stated that it required 800-something billion to conduct the census. So far, the money that has been allocated to the National Population Commission by the federal government is around 45% of the sum. And we know how much the census, the census program itself, how much it requires manpower, how much it costs money. So now we are going into a census. Out of 100% fund required, we have only gotten 45% fund. How prepared can we be for the census in that regard? Now, the second thing is the professional preparation of the commission itself. Less than 3 weeks to the census, the National Population Commission has not been able to conduct effective teaching process for its enumerators and facilitators. Just last week, this process was supposed to be conducted, but it wasn't conducted. It was adjourned. It Indefinitely, as reported by various news media. That's just 2-3 weeks to the population and to the census itself. Now, also, when we look at it from the security angle, when the representative of the commission was asked in regards to the security issue, he said on AIT, he said that in places where there are security issues, what they do is they reach an assumption of the numbers of persons that ought to be there. And we all know that assumption does not represent fact. So these are instances where people like us, we've always come out to say that the Population Commission is not effectively ready to conduct this census. And apart from that, all over the country, there are various people who are not in the places they ought to be. And don't let us forget that IDPs, and don't let us forget the implication of census. So if the people that ought to be in a particular location, in a particular area, in a particular society are not there, that means the numbers of persons will not be counted in that location, in that society. And that means that the government will not be able to allocate resources, to allocate transportation, to allocate educational facilities to that particular society, because it cannot effectively arrive at the numbers of persons in that society to be able to judiciously allocate resources to suit the demand and the numbers of people within that environment. So these are one of the reasons that militate against this particular census.
So these also basically form the crust of your lawsuit against the National Population Commission, asking a court to force it to postpone this exercise by 6 months. Am I correct?
Definitely.
All right, so Adewale, I want to come back to you, and you talk about IDPs. There's some change in methodology that we'll also talk about in a bit. But Adewale, when you look at the issues that Victor has raised, preparation, lack of funds, we've even heard reports that even some of the ad hoc staff are already protesting because of a lack of payment. One issue sticks out. The Buhari administration had 8 years to do a census. We know that the situation in 2016 and 2017 was tied to the economy. 2020 was tied to COVID-19. But now it seems you're rushing to do a census when you have barely 40-something days left in office. So why the rush? Why shouldn't this be left to the incoming administration rather than pushing through when, as Victor has said, you possibly only have 45% of your mobilization fee available?
Anyway, one thing is this. Conducting the census during this administration, I don't think it's a bad idea. Because they've been around the last 2-3 years, right? I think it's a bad idea. Like you actually said, in 2020, it was postponed. In 2016, it was
the
economy, right? But what is actually very, very germane is what Victor has said. Are they prepared? Are they going to be prepared? I could remember, I participated in the 1991 census. I was an enumerator then, right? There was adequate preparation. Although we came out with 89 million people then. But now, this 2023, we've not seen any sign of preparation from a National Population Commission. And they want to conduct census. You see, I think, to me, if this present government says they want to go ahead, fine. But how far have they prepared? That's the question. I've not seen any sign of sufficient, adequate preparation. How little it may be, unlike 1991, when I was privileged to be an administrator then. Nothing whatsoever. So what is bad if that, okay, the incoming administration of President-elect Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu was going to handle it. That's what he said. Since 1866, we've not had any successful census. That is generally accepted by all Nigerians.
Yes.
We've not had. So when you say rush, there are two things going in my brain. It wasn't rush. A government that has been existing since 2015, this 2023. Why can't we prepare adequately? Around 2020, they allocated 178 billion naira for the census before we had the issue there, right? I thought from there we should by now, the sensible chairman could have given us adequate preparation. But now, for my own field, personal field, we don't have adequate preparation.
Okay.
If the censor is postponed, right, giving it to the incoming administration, this is where we are. Governance is a continuum, right? You can't finish everything, right? Let's give it to the incoming administration. Let them have more time to prepare. To me, there's no any adequate preparation so far.
Okay. So, Victor, you mentioned, of course, in some situations, because of the IDP situation, internally displaced persons, you have enumerators oftentimes reaching assumptions about how many people should be in a locality. But it seems that the MPC has a new methodology that should take care of this. So the 2023 census, they say, will be Nigeria's first digital census and will also change the way in which the census is conducted going forward. The MPC Director of Public Affairs, Dr. Isaka Yahaya, has defended the methodology and described it as robust and in line with international standards. So this time around, we just won't be counting people in regular households, but we're also going to be counting people who stay in irregular households, such as people in transit, homeless persons, and even those in temporary living camps. The census questionnaire is also supposed to elicit information on the usual places of residence of people in IDP camps, which is where they would stay before the displacement, particularly when you come to this issue of IDPs and those who are moving around because of security situations. Do you think this will adequately address the issue of reaching assumptions about who is where, who lives where, so that it will help the government plan? How do you think a change in methodology such as this would even reflect on the data at the end of the exercise?
Now, when they said, I think I've listened to an interview from one of the representatives. Now, when they said they are deploying a new form of technology, especially for people who are not in a particular location, or to estimate them, what do they mean? They mean that for those areas where there are security issues, where their enumerators cannot go in person, count them, they will have a system where they will estimate the numbers of persons that ought to be there presently, judging from the numbers of persons that were there previously. Now, what is important is it is still an assumption. It is not based on fact. It is not based on the particular numbers of persons that are there. So there's always a danger of overestimation or underestimation. Now, this is the issue. We are not talking about whether or not they are able to count people, if they are able to. What we are talking about is that the IDPs, for instance, where they are staying currently is not their natural habitat. It's not where they stay, where they live normally. And when whatever issue that led to them being in IDP camp, probably flooding, environmental issues, and banditry or whatever, chances are that these things will subside or totally be away, and they will return back to where it is they came from. Now, if you count them in IDP, and we have agreed that one of the purposes of census is to ensure that resources are allocated effectively to individuals that are counted within a particular environment, territory, or society. Now, if you count these people in IDP camp, before the next census, and they return back to their ancestral land, or their wherever it is that they came from previously before they went to the IDP camp, how will the government be able to make effective preparation for them or allocate effective resources for them? Wherefore, they were not counted in the place where they naturally ought to be. So that is the issue. It's not whether or not they were able to count them in IDP camp. These people might not totally continue forever to live in IDP camp. When they return back to their homes, their lands, the counting in IDP camp will be transmuted into that particular place where they naturally ought to be or where they came from. So it will not be. That is one of the reasons why we are saying that this census should be postponed, so that we will not end up wasting money that we do not have, so that we will not have another issue on our end. That is why we are advocating for it. Now, apart from all this, the publicity is also deeply lacking. It is inefficient. The publicity the Commission has done so far is grossly lacking and inefficient. So this is one of the reasons why we are saying this census need to be postponed. If what they actually want to achieve is the effective counting of individuals in this country, and if they understand the importance of this census.
So, Victor, I want to stay with you, but Adewale, I'll bring this question to you as well, because we are just about 2 weeks away from the beginning of this national exercise. It's a much needed one, even with all the issues and controversies. But what we've seen is that in matters of national interest, we have to battle lingering division and suspicion that we all can acknowledge tends to exist between Nigeria's ethnicities, particularly on the issue of census. But interestingly enough, this year, census will have no columns for questions on religion or ethnicity. So, Victor, let me start with you. Is this progress, or is this vital information that we could also be missing out on? Is it time to phase out ethnicity and religion on our national census?
I don't see it as progress, because one of the things we need in this country, we need to have a good data of the numbers of each ethnic groups in this country, the numbers of people who belong to a particular religion in this country. When we want to face a problem, dodging the problem like bullet does not solve the problem. It doesn't make the problem go away. The fact that religion and ethnicity will not be included in this census does not help anything. It's just like shifting the whole thing to a further time. It doesn't solve anything. It doesn't help anything. So it should be included actually. So it's not as if it's helpful.
Adewale, what do you think? I think some Nigerians might be surprised to hear they won't have to answer questions about religion and ethnicity. Is this something we should be happy with, or is that information still very critical for a country such as ours?
Anyway, it's not about it's not an issue. It's about an individual. And as I've said, in 1962, 63 census, ethnicity is there. 52, 53, ethnicity is there. Because many people believe, okay, look at what happened in 2006. When they said, Kano people are much more than people in Lagos. The president-elect was the governor of Lagos State. He kicked against it, saying that no, Lagos State is more than 9.7 million. That Lagos State then was 17.5 million. You see, the ethnicity religion will continue to be. It's so personal. Many people think that in my state, they will see us as being much more than other states. So that, okay, what's the essence of census? We're having census to know the government will be able to provide necessity tools for the people in certain particular area. So people are thinking that it's okay, you are so number higher than you will get more. So it will continue. What I think we need is sensitization, right? People must be educated through the media or all means. But tell me, look, we need to know the actual number of the people. It doesn't matter. You are going to get the best from the government. If I know I'm going to get the best from the irrespective of the numerical value, I'll be relaxed. Say, okay, I'll be using to tell you the truth. But so far, the government is hammered on it that we want to know the number of people that are here, so as to know what to provide for you. The ethnicity will continue. The religion will continue.
So let me follow up with that, because this census is coming at a time when Nigeria has dwindling revenues. Let's be honest. We're struggling to meet our bills per day quota for INEC. We had a situation last year where debt servicing overtook revenue at the end of the day. It's basically a fight of some 200 million people for what is now becoming scarce resources. And when you look at that sort of fights, we find ourselves always jostling and positioning to get more out of the federation, to get more allocation as we see it. So when we look at this census coming, as Victor said earlier, about 869 billion, which comes to about $1.88 billion. And this is coming after INEC spent as much money as it did and gave Nigerians the process, and let's just leave it at the process. It gave Nigerians the process it gave them. So when we have this fight for resources, this is a critical time to know how many Nigerians really exist. Do you think we're really tied into why this particular 2023 census is so necessary? Let's not forget we have a birth rate that ends up fighting with our GDP, almost parallel. So we're not growing enough as an economy to cater for the number of Nigerians that are being brought into the country.
Yes. What I think is that sincerity of purpose is very, very important. We need to be sincere with ourselves. But in Nigeria, truth is so scarce. I get it. When you are truthful to me, I'll be truthful to the government. When we need to sit down in all honesty that we don't have any other country. How can we move forward in this country? In developed nation, instead of the money, I must tell you, I know that the government is so large, the government can provide money at any given time. I get it. But the money, for instance, that's it, a private government is borrowing money. It's not my concern. But my concern is that when you borrow money for certain things, for certain projects, do you make that money, use of that money for the project?
And can the project pay back for the money?
Well, pay back. Our American state show we don't tap on it. That's my problem, right? With this Nigerian government, getting money for government to get money is not as difficult as that.
Okay.
But are we making proper use of the money? That's the question. If the censor, as the NPC, the settled NPC, they allocated money for the government have to get the money. But are we making judiciously use of it?
So let me throw that.
That's the problem.
So let me end with this because of the time. Let me go to Victor now. And as you said earlier, it's the Minister of State for Budget and National Planning, Clem Agba, who has said that this is a census that's going to be conducted in partnership with development partners. We're about to spend about 869 billion, but according to you, about just 45% of that money has been allocated at this point in time. There are even post-census activities that run upwards of 626 billion for census at $6 per capita. And then we should expect some 243 billion, around $527 million for post-census activities that lead up to 2025. This is a conversation about confidence and trust in government as well, and faith. So Victor, I'll end with that because I'd also like to hear from you on the status of the lawsuit that you filed. Do you have faith that the MPC, with what they have right now, can give Nigerians a census that would be fairly adjudged as acceptable to the majority of the country? And what's the status of your lawsuits? What should we expect next as you go to court to postpone this same census?
Okay, in regards to my trust in the process, I would like to state very quickly, trust in a system, in an institution is not demanded. Trust in an institution is earned. The National Population Commission has not shown anything so far to discerning minds, to earn their trust in the system. From what we have seen so far, from what we have heard so far, we find it very difficult to repose our trust in the system. In regards to the lawsuit is currently it's coming up this very week that we're entering. So we are hopeful that the court will hold in our favor.
All right, so Victor, we'll leave it at that because of time, but we will continue to follow up with you. We are just a few days away. Starting on May the 3rd, there's now a lawsuit asking that it be postponed for at least 6 months, but concerns about the lack of funds, the preparation, and even the education, because even with many people here, there's questions as to when is the census happening? What am I supposed to do? So we have issues that the National Population Commission must answer before this census. Adewale Oguniran, public analyst and publisher of the integrityreporters.com, as well as Victor Patola, legal practitioner. Thank you so much for joining me on this segment of Politics HQ. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, so we're going to take a quick time out. When we come back, Nigeria's House of Representatives is threatening to arrest the Attorney General of the Federation, as well as the Minister of Finance. I'll tell you more about this after the break.